Hi, my name is Dr. Deborah Giles. I'm the Science and Research Director for the nonprofit Wild Orca.
And I'm Sarah Teman, Research Assistant with the SeaDoc Society.
We're excited to present our research on the killing of porpoise by fish-eating southern resident killer whales, a behavior we call Phocoenacide. We would like to thank all of our co-authors who gathered these data and everyone who has sent us reports of this fascinating behavior. Let's dive right in. Choice of food is the most obvious distinction between the two main ecotypes of killer whales in the Salish Sea. The southern residents overwhelmingly eat salmon, preferentially Chinook salmon, while Biggs killer whales, formerly called transients, eat marine mammals like seals, sea lions, and porpoises. As Chinook salmon have declined, southern resident mortality has increased. In the early 2000s, the whales were federally listed as endangered in both the US and Canada. The lack of prey for the southern residents is one of the main identified factors making their recovery so challenging. So it is extremely interesting that this endangered population of whales has been observed killing but not eating porpoises in the Salish Sea. Here we see L119 holding up a young harbor porpoise during a harassment incident that lasted over an hour and resulted in the death of this animal. I personally witnessed this behavior for the first time in 2005 and was stunned. It made me wonder, why are they spending time and energy catching and playing with an animal that could so easily become dinner but is not eaten? Especially when, even by 2005, researchers already knew that the whales were nutritionally deprived. In reviewing the cases, we see that these interactions often involve the whales chasing the porpoise, slamming into it, pushing it around, and carrying it on their backs. Not surprisingly, many porpoise do not survive these interactions. Observers often describe these interactions as seeming like play behavior rather than aggressive, territorial, or predatory.
Since the 1960s, there have been over 70 occurrences of this behavior, with L-pod engaging the most. The behavior seemed to start with L-pod, which is seen on the bottom row, followed by K and J pods catching up in recent years. For each pod, we calculated an annual rate of porpoise harassment, which was the number of times a pod engaged in porpoise harassing divided by the number of times the pod was encountered by Center for Whale Research. This confirmed that L-pod engaged in the behavior more than the other pods. To see if pod rates changed over time, we divided the data set into 2 time blocks and repeated the analyses. We found that L-pod engaged much more in the first time block, and J and K pods nearly caught up to L-pod by the second time block. This hints at cultural transmission of the behavior between pods over time. Looking at sex, there was no significant difference in the harassment rate between males and females. 7 matrilines were responsible for the most incidents. We were curious to know if within a matriline were only certain individuals engaging in the behavior, or did more members pick it up over time? Here, each graph is a matriline, a circle or triangle is a whale in the matriline, the x-axis is the year, and the y-axis is the age of the whale. We saw that a lot of matrilines had more young whales engaging in the behavior as time went on. Similarly, with J-pod matrilines, there were many new younger individuals engaging over time. It appears that once the behavior was established, it becomes part of the behavior repertoire of the individual. And yet there are other individuals where we have never documented this behavior, even within the same matriline. More incidents occurred with harbor than Dall's porpoises, but that could be because in recent years, there have been more harbor porpoises in the Salish Sea. Interestingly, about 40% of all porpoises harassed were calves or neonates. Confirmed and suspected kills each occurred in about 20% of events. For the remaining 60%, we did not have data on the health or survival outcome of the porpoise. 9 porpoises that were killed by southern residents were collected for necropsy. The primary cause of death for all porpoises was trauma from the interaction, and the majority of porpoises did not have a significant underlying condition that could have predisposed them to attack. Hemorrhaging was seen in all porpoises, and some had lacerations or puncture wounds, but there has been no confirmed record of consumption in any case. While the significance of this behavior is yet to be fully understood, these early findings show how different southern residents have engaged in this behavior over time.
So now for the big question, why do the southern residents do this? Honestly, we'll likely never know for sure. While this behavior has been recorded in both northern and Alaskan fish-eating residents, it has not been documented nearly as often in these other populations. The bottom line is, killer whales are predators, and young porpoises are similar in size to their main prey, Chinook salmon. So whether these whales are just playing or practicing how to hunt and handle salmon, we may never fully understand this interesting behavior.
We thank our co-authors who gathered these data and all who have shared sightings.
Thank you to everyone, and please send us any additional sightings you may have.